this event, and if any of our participants have objection to this, then we would request you to kindly leave the meeting, but otherwise this event will be recorded and later streamed on YouTube as well. So welcome all of you, and today's event we have is the report launch on from our study, simulation-based study to evaluate the effects of e-mobility smart charging strategies. Our report is titled A Critical Review of Smart Charging Strategies and Technologies for Electric Vehicles. Before we start off with the formal event, I have a few housekeeping rules. I would request all the members of the audience to kindly put yourselves on mute and also turn your video cameras off. The speakers are requested to turn on their cameras as and when they are requested to speak. First and the foremost, to provide the opening remarks and the welcome address, we have Dr. Winfried Dahm, Head of Indo-German Energy Program, GIZ India. Dr. Dahm, over to you, please.
Thank you, and namaste. Thanks everyone for joining this first step of a journey to smart charging. Why is smart charging that important? Well, let me first thank and appreciate the commitment of India to decarbonize by 2070 and having joined the Zero Emission Vehicle Declaration at COP. Hence, all sectors need to become decarbonized and set up roadmaps for the next decades, but also for the next years to come to become carbon neutral. And the transport sector has committed to step up to have 100% zero emission vehicles sale by already 2040 at latest. So within the next 25, 28 years, all new sales will be only electric or even shorter than this. But India wants to achieve already by 2030 non-carbon vehicles sales of 80% in the 2- and 3-wheeler market, 70% in the commercial market, 40% in e-buses, 30% in private cars. Hence, we will see millions of e-vehicles coming up. Nearly 1 million, to be more precise, 0.9 million are already officially registered. So there are so many others non-registered around. And they all need electricity. And I hope green electricity. If this is an issue for India to come up with sufficient green electricity, no, that's easily done. And it will benefit India in so many topics, from additional job opportunity to the reduced imports, from declining air pollution to less noise. But being a utility guy myself, there's one issue on the horizon. If so many want to charge at the very same time, this cannot be done by the existing grid. It's very same that not all vehicles can be refueled at the very same time. So we are building up a new infrastructure in India. And this should be done smartly. What does it mean, smart infrastructure, smart charging? Well, charge should be done whenever there is cheap renewable power available. That implies often during off-peak times, and don't charge when the grid is at its limit. And of course, don't get transformer burned, which is the same as grids as its limits. And this can be easily and fairly conveniently achieved. But it requires a lot of communication between the charging station, the grid, and the specific electric vehicle. There are numerous ways of doing it, but we need to learn more about the pros and cons of the various ways. And this is what we are talking about today, and especially in the future. So let me thank BMU, the Environment Ministry from Germany, to sponsor all this, and Niti Aayog for pushing this futuristic topic. It's not, as I mentioned, a topic of today or 22. It will be a topic of in a few years to come. And we are now start to discuss a framework condition for that new business. And it would be very beneficial for India and all the market participants to come up with proper solutions for those days to come. Therefore, I'm really happy that we have such a strong consortia who are coming up with the suggestions on technical as well as on the policy side by next summer. And today we will learn about the current status worldwide, from charging stations being part of virtual power plants in Denmark or the new grid codes in Germany to allow vehicles to grid. Or to frame it differently, how can e-vehicles owner and charging stations earn money by supporting the utilities in their grid services? And of course, I like to thank very much Tata, who provided us all the necessary data in some feeder areas of 3 different major cities in India. Expect some interesting presentations today. But first, I pass on and welcome Mr. Koch from the German Embassy, who is Head of Economic and Global Affairs. He gives us the guidelines where and how to work. He assures the proper spending of more than 1.2 billion euros from Germany, just being agreed in the annual government-to-government negotiations last week. Thanks, Mr. Koch, for joining. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Damm, and esteemed fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the invitation speaking today, although I was not expecting that so much burden would be put on my shoulders, what you just did, but certainly at the embassy, also with our team from the Development Cooperation Division, we do our best to contribute and make sure that the funds you refer to will be spent to the maximum use of everybody in India and also in Germany. Now, speaking about electromobility and all the necessary efforts in order to implement that, it's obviously necessary to mention that in the German case, this is definitely part of a broader agenda of decarbonization until 2045, which was agreed upon by the Federal Parliament last June, when the climate law had to be sharpened up due to an intervention by our Constitutional Court. And also this is part of broad efforts at the EU level, where the decarbonization target is 2050. Obviously, all sectors of the economy have to contribute to that effort, and that is certainly not limited to, but a very relevant sector is indeed the transport sector. And it's not only relevant, it's a major challenge to decarbonize the transport sector, specifically when you're looking at what happened in Germany over the last years, when actually emissions slightly rose instead of declining. But now, due to a number of decisions taken by the government, by our previous government, which is due to hand over power to the new government, which is supposed to be elected by the Federal Parliament next week, but they have by no means been lazy, but have put some trains on the tracks, so to say, like the charging infrastructure master plan, which was agreed upon in 2019, which represents the foundation for the rapid expansion of the charging infrastructure in Germany, and upon which the National Center for Charging Infrastructure was established. That center actively promotes the development of charging infrastructure throughout Germany. Its goal is to have a nationwide, demand-oriented and user-friendly charging infrastructure system. So in just 2 more years, meaning that by the end of 2023, a new fast charging network is to connect all regions in Germany. By the end of next month, 50,000 publicly accessible fast and normal charging points are to be available for the convenient charging of e-vehicles, and looks like we have already fulfilled that target. The Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure initiated a program in the field of battery electric drives in 2020, known as electromobility before your doorstep, a funding program for local electric mobility. The climate policy objective of that program is shaping an energy efficient and environmentally compatible transport sector by exploiting renewable energy sources in transport. As far as electric mobility is concerned, the declared goal is to keep driving the market ramp up in Germany and to pave the way for the full market penetration of electric vehicles. And as such, electric mobility is a pivotal element of a sustainable transport system and is essential for achieving the climate protection goals for transport described above. KfW supported the installation of private charging stations. About 800,000 grants for households have already been approved. And this is about 1% of the population, which would correspond in India to about 14 million charging stations to be established for comparison purposes. We've also established the National Network for Competence in Mobility, which was established by the same Ministry for Transport and Digital Infrastructure on the federal level. The state of Saarland, as representative of the federal states, and the Association of German Cities. And the plan is to interlink municipalities, federal states, and the federal government with each other, as well as with experts from relevant stakeholder groups throughout Germany. So these have been some of the initiatives undertaken by the current government. But as you may know, from next week onwards, we will have a new coalition government, which recently published its coalition agreement. And as regards electromobility, they have come up with a number of quite ambitious targets, which would include 15 million fully electric cars on the road by 2030, which would be roughly about 1/3 of all cars available. In order to get that done, we are in front of a major transformation of the car industry away from combustion engines towards fully electric engines, which obviously also makes necessary to research even more on batteries and a sustainable form of battery power for cars. In order to ramp up further the charging infrastructure, we would have to achieve by 2030 1 million public, non-discriminatory public charging stations. And in order to make this something really environment friendly and climate friendly, we are foreseeing the increase in the gross electricity consumption from currently 550 terawatt hours to about 750 terawatt hours by 2030. And according to these plans, 80% of this electricity consumption would have been generated with renewable energies by in the same time period until 2030. So while this has been a very brief overview of what has been happening in Germany and what is supposed to happen in the next 9 years in Germany, and I'd also like to address briefly some elements of cooperation between India and Germany in that very field. The German federal government's support to India through the Green Urban Mobility Project, financed by the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, focuses on development of efficient, low-cost, and green mobility infrastructure. That partnership aims to boost ongoing technical and financial cooperation between both countries by supporting expansion of public transport infrastructure, multimodal integration, zero-emission technologies, and non-motorized transport. The Nationally Determined Contribution Transport Initiative for Asia is a regional program funded by the International Climate Initiative of the German Ministry of Environment, engaging India, China, and Vietnam. It aims to develop pathways towards decarbonizing transport, improve greenhouse gas and transport modeling capacities, support development of policies and technical standards to promote uptake of EV charging infrastructure, and develop EV cost-benefit analysis tools, among other key initiatives, through multi-stakeholder dialogues. The importance of smart charging of electric vehicles and charging infrastructure should be realized right from the growth phase of the market. Since with increased penetration of electric vehicles to the power grid, there will be challenges faced in the demand-supply management, peak load hours, harmonics and congestion, amongst others. To avoid those challenges, coupling of transport and energy sector is a must, which can be well achieved by smart or managed charging. And indeed, it's GIZ, which is therefore supporting the government of India in achieving its NDC targets and progress towards the global climate goal via technical assistance and cooperation. And indeed, that should be the spirit, the international spirit, in order to tackle climate change and the energy transition, to do it in a spirit, in a mode of cooperation, and that is what we're here for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koch. Was a very helpful start for our conference today. And now I don't want to spoil the organization, but I'd like to welcome Mr. Sinner and recall our nice meeting we had at Niti Aayog for pushing the issue. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Dr. Winfried Dam. Thank you, Dr. Stephen, for such an enlightening kind of perspective of what is going around and what initiatives have been taken. Indradeep Mitra and his team, yes, the way you are pulling it off, that is something unimaginable. Now, the entire consortium, led by, of course, GIZ and the 7 members, and with the best of the technology institutes of the world, maybe from Spain, maybe from Denmark, India, Germany, together they are concentrating on finding out solutions on charging infrastructure, how exactly to proliferate it. Now, electric mobility is going to be the in thing today. The entire world is now kind of committed to transform, to go in with this disruption, to stand by it, take it from ICE, internal combustion engine, to a kind of electric mobility, transformative mobility. Now, if the sphere of electric mobility, if battery is the kind of heart of it, then charging infrastructure is the respiratory system for it. So in a way, both of them are cognates. One cannot go ahead, the batteries cannot go ahead without a solid base for the charging infrastructure. Now in India, of course, charging infrastructure has been included in the FAME intervention, FAME initiative, and we are attempting to kind of proliferate charging infrastructure so that all the anxieties that are in the minds of the patrons of electric mobility, that can be taken care of. In the FAME, which is a national flagship kind of scheme of Government of India to take electric mobility forward, in that FAME scheme, the part 1, the phase 1, version 1, 520 charging infrastructure were laid down. That was, of course, a very small number. But in FAME 2, the second version of it, which was started in 2019 and is continuing, 2,877 charging infrastructure have been sanctioned, and they are in the process of installation. Similarly, on the expressways and highways, we have identified 9 expressways and 16 highways for installation of 1,576 charging stations. And one of our oil marketing company, BPCL, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, that has decided, that has been given a kind of responsibility to set up 22,000 charging stations at their existing petrol bunks, and that creates a lot of positive vibes in the minds of all those who want to switch over, or who are on the fence on deciding whether they should be shifting to electric mobility or not. Now, as far as this particular report is concerned, it is very heartening to see that a lot of hard work has gone into it. And I was going through it, and I can tell you that the best of the global case studies have been taken. They have been incorporated, analyzed, and put up by the authors to the readers of this report. Now, the concept, the entire overview has been clarified for how to go ahead with this particular charging infrastructure. In addition to the global perspectives, the gap analysis has been done of Indian cases, that where exactly is the deficiency. So at the end of the day, the idea is that the most appropriate charging station type at the most appropriate location. So that is the kind of riddle, that is the kind of conundrum that needs to be solved. And that is precisely what this particular report is attempting at. In addition to the gap analysis at a subsequent stage, it is also giving the interventions, a set of interventions have been recommended, that how to go ahead with it. And I'm sure that is going to be very, very enlightening, and that will be taken forward. It talks about a framework for data analysis. So that shows that the authors of it, those who have put in so much of hard work, they have really gone into very, very granular details to kind of analyze that where exactly it should be located, how many of them should be located, what should be the kind of it that should be located, and yes, subsequently what could be the other factors that could lead into the change, even the imponderables, I would say. Everything has been analyzed into detail. So a lot of congratulations to the authors of the report. Lot of congratulations to GIZ, Dr. Winfred Dam and his entire team, Indeep Mitra and his entire team. The way you have coordinated among all the consortium members. And in addition to that, the best of the technical institutes of the world, at least 4 of them to start to what I find mentioned here, and then pulled out this report. That is something which is really, really phenomenal. And we look forward that at least to start with, in the 9 lighthouse cities of India, where the population is 4 million plus, in these cities must be proliferated with charging infrastructure in a big way, so that they can act as lighthouses, they can act as inspiration for the whole of the countries, and it can be taken forward. The numbers which I mentioned to you, which were close to almost 25,000, close to like that number is there, charging stations that has already been planned, in the process of planning, maybe in a time span of 4 to 6 months kind of thing. Now, in addition, that is a kind of central initiative. In addition to that, the states, which are primary driver of electric mobility in our country, because they have got their own policies, they are also pulling out, they are also creating, they are also thinking through the architecture of locations, that where exactly this new charging infrastructure should be located. And they are working in their own way, on their own way, with their own interventions, initiative, funds, and the management policies, how to go ahead with it, and that is proliferating. So at the end of it, let me congratulate to the entire team that has worked that has coordinated with NITI, that has coordinated among themselves, and has come out with this particular report. I know that this is the first in the series, and we will have more such of the kinds. It will so that the entire charging infrastructure thing can be proliferated as fast as possible on Indian soil, so that this electric mobility can be taken forward. Frankly speaking, Dr. Dam, right now I'm talking to you from Pune, and I had gone to the Tata's plant, and Tata's told me that today they are manufacturing almost close to 70 vehicles a day, and they are not able to meet the orders. So that they are saying that from January, they are going to ramp up the capacity to 100. And of course, they did mention about that, however, charging infrastructure will be a constraint. And then I equally in the same breath, I did mention that in the second half, I will be talking to the GIZ, congratulating them on the report. And they are the ones who are trying to pull it off. And I'm sure that in times to come, we are going to be standby. We'll become a forerunner on this disruption, on one of the greatest disruption of our times on electric mobility, which will also create a lot of opportunities for employment, lot of opportunities for the prosperity of the state. So thank you, Dr. Dam. Thank you to Indeep Mitra and to the entire team, Dr. Dam, for coming out with such a wonderful report. And we will look forward to the further series, whatever the second or the third one that is coming out in the entire series. And with this, of course, with your permission, Dr. Dam, we would like to I would like to release this particular report to the public for their understanding, for their reports, for their comments. And I'm sure whatever learnings are there, we will be able to take it forward. So with this is the report. What a wonderful inaugural smart charging strategy and technology for electric vehicles. This is really one of the most needed, I would say, report, most needed understanding that is required as of now. And probably once that we have been able to tide over the challenges of incentivizing it, challenges of manufacturing, we are going in for PLI scheme of battery. Now this charging strategy has to be this has to be the, I would call it the last biggest push, so that the whole this thing that this disruption comes to that point of inflection, that tipping point from where all of us can take the back seat, all of us can have the satisfaction that we were a partner, we were a kind of a strategist, we were a kind of planners for taking this mobility forward. Thank you and congratulations to all. Thank you.
Let me say thank you very much, Mr. Sinha, for your kind words and comments. And I'm always impressed what India is achieving. What in Germany it takes often years, you achieve in a month in this country. And with your determination, we are getting ahead of the other countries as well. I love to recall our meeting, and you rightly pointed out there are a couple of small, well, actually major issues. One is a easy, transparent, reliable access to charging points in the public. And the second one, you need a kind of unified payment. So me being a consumer, I love to have an app where I get the next charging station displayed. I can read what are the costs. Is it available? I get there. I know how much how much time I do need to refill, how much I want, and then leave that charging point. So this is the vision, and then I pay on any charging point pan India with my payment means without any complication. So that's my dream. Let's see how fast we can achieve it. Thank you so much for joining. And everything will not be possible without having the discoms with us. So we have Mr. Sinha from Tata with us. So Mr. Sinha, we had so many discussions on those other topics as well. And I really thank you for joining us today, and thank you for joining and giving us the data which is required to make the analysis. And you do all this without any reimbursement and cost for us. So thank you so much of joining the consortium, and we are looking forward to your contribution. Please, the floor is yours. I think you need to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Dr. Dam, such a pleasure to participate in the program today when you are releasing the report on the simulation study which has been carried out for e-mobility for smart charging. From Tata Power side, I would like to compliment you, as also the other study partners, especially the Fraunhofer Institute of Energy Economics, the IIT Komilas, IIT Mumbai, and the DTU Copenhagen, Denmark. And as I mentioned to you, Tata Power has always been in the forefront of working in these areas. And for us, it's a matter of pride to be associated with this project, wherein we had shared a lot of data on how the various electrical network will work under the charging of electric vehicles. I think from a utility perspective, it's very important that we have smart charging. And for us, it's very important that how do we make the charging seamless as an experience for the consumers. And we have thereby ensured that the app that we create for our consumers, and we have more than actually 1,000 public charging facilities that we have created, and the app, and you were mentioning that it should tell you where the charging points are. So if you're traveling from your home to office or from your office to airport, it will tell you where are the locations, which are the locations where you have the charging points, and where you can get it charged. You can pay the whole amount that you want to charge through your app. And also it will tell you that whether the charging point is being utilized, you want to reserve it for yourself, and very many other information and data it gives in terms of optimizing your charging for the vehicle, in terms of cost and also in terms of the time that it will take. But having said that, let me try to delve that why it is important to have smart charging. It is very important for a network operator to ensure that the charging, when it takes place, it does not lead to any disruption in supply of electricity, not only to the electric mobility chargers, but also to the other consumers who are connected to that feeder or to that transformer. And that's why the smart charger is a very big necessity, because it can help in ensuring that the charging takes place at a time where not all the vehicles are charging together, or how do you move the load from one feeder to another feeder so that it does not lead to any disruption of supply. We have been working on those solutions, and today I can tell you that they are smart on real-time solutions which are coming up, which will help the consumer to decide also that when they should charge and what is the optimized way of charging. As also, it will help the utilities to plan that where the maximum charging will take place. Just imagine if there are 50 buses charging at the same time, or people who come to office and at the same time in morning 9 o'clock or 9:30 start charging vehicle, what will happen? So how do you ensure that the whole charging process is staggered during the day or during different hours of the day in different locations? And I think the smart charging is going to help us in this effort. It will not only help us in planning for a peak power requirement, but also shift the peaking that is required that will take place. And the benefit of it is you will not unnecessarily set up generating plants, you will not unnecessarily set up the transmission and distribution system, and to that extent defray the capital cost that you would otherwise incur if it was not a smart charger and it was not planned properly. When we are moving towards charging, the other big issue that we need to see is that the whole purpose of electric vehicle is we are decarbonizing the transport sector. We are moving the electrical mobility toward decarbonization, and the ideal situation will be where we can do the electric charging of the vehicles through renewable sources and not through the conventional sources. This will of course take some time because the penetration of renewable energy is still going to get enhanced, and as the country has taken a very bold step and the announcement by the Prime Minister that by 2030 we'll have 500 megawatt of non-carbon generation. I think by that time we will be able to plan it in such a way that all the energy requirements of electric vehicle or of electric mobility can be done in such a way that it comes through the renewable sources and not through the conventional power sources. I think that will be the real tribute to the work that is being done by engineers and scientists in India, and also the support that we are getting from all our partners, especially GIZ, who has always been in the forefront in promoting the renewable energy and smart energy usage in the country. I'm very delighted to share with you that Tata Power has been working in this area. We've tied up with number of user agencies like the oil companies, the user partners who are there, the corporations, the owners of commercial spaces, and so also the public transportation system to ensure that we provide them a seamless experience of providing the EV charger. We are working on a very ambitious project that anyone driving from Kashmir to Kanyakumari or from Northeast to Gujarat, they will have EV charging infrastructure right across the highways, the 3,600 kilometers from north to south, and then 3,000 kilometers from northeast to the western part of India. On these highways, every 150 kilometers, we'll have a charging infrastructure to support anyone who travels across the country to have the experience of charging wherever they want and not be worried about that my vehicle will get discharged and I will get stuck on the roads. So I think we live in very exciting times. These are new areas, but I think with the cooperation of the partners that we have and some of the technology interventions that is happening, we will be able to come up with very good solutions which will help us to move towards cleaner energy for usage as well as cleaner energy for mobility purpose. Once again, I would like to compliment all the stakeholders and partners who have been involved in preparing this report. This is, I think, the beginning of many more reports and many more studies that will be carried out, which will help the country to transition to clean energy solutions and clean charging solutions for the consumers. So once again, thank you, and my best wishes to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinha. And it's so nice to see how strongly Tata is pushing not only e-mobility, but also green electricity to power those e-vehicles. Thank you so much. But now I pass on to Sahana to steer the meeting. Sorry for.
Thank you, Dr. Dam. It was a pleasure to have you take over in thanking our speakers and also inviting them to speak. It was indeed an honor. Thank you very much. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank Mr. Shudhendu Jyoti Sinha sir, Advisor, Infrastructure Connectivity and Electric Mobility Vertical, Niti Aayog, Government of India, and also Dr. Praveer Sinha, CEO, Managing Director, Tata Power Company Limited, for your kind words on this report. Now we will move across to the more technical sessions of today's event. I would like to request the audience to put up your queries into the chat box. And although we do not have a dedicated Q&A session in this event, we will make sure that all your queries would be answered, and we will upload this document onto our DLGM portal. I would now request Professor Pablo Frias, Universidad Pontificia Comillas, IIT Comillas, to kindly present us the EV impact into power system and power grid challenges and opportunities. Over to you, Professor Pablo.
Okay, so thank you very much. Dear all, I mean, in order to set the foundations and the background on smart charging and trying to understand which is the impact on the power system, which is the topic of today's discussion, we basically propose, let's say, like a list of questions that some of them are already being posed by the previous speakers. So for instance, we want to understand what is different with electric vehicle, how long will take electric vehicles to really have effect, how much, where, when, and how to deal with it. So first of all, when thinking about plugging in electric vehicles into the grid, the first question we do is why we need to care about that. Why electric vehicles are different from what we already know? And the answer is yes, they are different because they are not, let's say, conventional loads like lighting or like, let's say, the traditional heating systems. What we have been working on in the last 100 years, it's something different. It's different because it's based on power electronics, which raise some power quality issues in the operation of the distribution networks. And it is also a mobile load, which is something that for a traditional distribution or network operator is really something challenging. However, it also brings some additional, let's say, good ideas. For instance, you as a user can control the consumption of the electric vehicle, can regulate the load it consumes, and when this is consumed. So if we aggregate all these individual effects or actions is what we call flexibility. That's a flexible load. And that's something that for the power system and for the networks could be something really interesting to deal with. And finally, let's say a more advanced, let's say, characteristic that electric vehicles can bring to us is that they can not only act as an electric load, but also can support the network in case it is required. The second question we have is that how long this will take. So the first answer is that electric vehicles are here and now. It's not still in the wish list. It's something happening right now. All the car makers nowadays, they have different models of electric cars. But the question is, how fast is this increase of electric vehicles in the system? Here I bring you some figure coming out from the EV Outlook from the International Energy Agency, where basically you can see that for the next decade, it is expected, let's say, a reasonable increase of electric vehicles, still quite far away from the maximum. One of the reasoning that I always make when I try to discuss how fast we can go is, let's consider the fleet of vehicles that we have, for instance, in India. It's almost 300 million. So if we now know that every year, let's say the capacity of the market is around 20 million vehicles sales every year, you can have an idea of how fast we can go. The fastest we can go is 15 years. So in 15 years, if everything is sold by electric vehicles, we will reach this, let's say, massive amount of full electrification of the fleet. However, nowadays, this is quite limited. And this is limited because of environmental issues, energy dependency that drives some policies. But on the other side, how is the social acceptance for that? Okay, so this brings the idea of we have time to react. But this is something that is nowadays happening. The second very important question when discussing about the technologies is that nowadays electric vehicles based on the batteries, based on lithium-ion batteries, is a reality, and that's the future. However, there are other options, there are other technologies like fuel cells that may come and they may, let's say, change the way this figure is brought. The next question that we have when thinking about, let's say, the impact in the system, we basically have two big agents. One is the power system, the second one is the network. When we think about the power system, there is, let's say, a big, I mean, if we take the worldwide analysis and we look forward into the next 10 or 30 years, you see here that the energy consumption for the electrification, we mostly go to private vehicles. However, this is not the same in the regions. So if you go to India, which is the topic of today, we basically move directly to the two-wheelers. This increase of the load, if you see that in this table coming from the NSOE report recently developed, we basically see that this will pose an increase of 3%. 3% over 10 years, I would say it's almost nothing. So the energy system should be somehow prepared to inject or to integrate these new loads into the system. This is the first step. However, it's a real important issue that if we are able to incorporate this into the system and we have a generation portfolio where we have renewable generation, it's the fastest way to decarbonize current transportation system, as previous speakers already mentioned. And not only that, this flexibility that we already mentioned can also bring benefits into the system operation. If we now look into the networks, we basically see that the impact could be completely different. Here you have the pictures of a rural network, just on the right, and on the top you have some urban, semi-urban network. Really, the impact that they may pose of a charging point is completely different, whether we go into one network or the other. So that's why some of the previous speakers ask for an optimization in the locations of this charging infrastructure in order to have, let's say, a minimum impact into the system. For that, here I bring you some very easy to understand, let's say, simulation where we have developed, let's say, for previous projects, where here you see different options of charging. Of course, we can have the charging system in a specific network if we do it in the peak hours when everybody, it's what we call dumb charging, or we could do it in other positions. We're basically doing it smart, so not in the peak, but in other places. So the impact that we have in network reinforcements are clearly done here if we do it in the peak. And here you can see down in this figure, in the low voltage network, if we charge during the peak, we will have an increase of investment. That's okay, although we have, let's say, a smart charging system. However, in this secondary substation, which is the transformation from the low voltage up to the medium voltage, again, there will be more challenges and more investments required. So this is very important. It's not only where we define the different positions, but also is very important to know when we do it. Okay, so that's why it is very important that we incorporate some kind of smartness in the flexibility we provide to the system. And that's also why it is very important under the current uncertainty that we have to develop the different infrastructures, that we need to evaluate as many as possible real scenarios of real networks to see which are the real effects. This is very important because also this will be the way to really drive the new policies, promote the new regulations in order to have efficient integration and efficient decarbonization of transportation through this smart charging. And of course, this is an example for that. It is very important to bring all stakeholders together to really push all of them into exactly the same direction. So this is it from my side. Now I pass the word to my colleague Thijs. He will explain a bit more in detail more the technologies of smart charging. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. Just make sure I'm sharing my slides. Can you confirm they are visible?
Yes, Mr. Thijs, they are visible.
Thank you very much. So I'm here to present how smart charging can solve challenges and bring benefits. And this is part of the simulation-based study to evaluate the effects of e-mobility in smart charging strategies. And I'm representing the Technical University of Denmark. First, we can compare smart charging to dumb charging, commonly referred to as passive charging. As illustrated with the blue line, the dumb charges initiates the charging sequence as soon as the EV is plugged in. The EV is then charged with the rated power until the desired state of charge is reached. Therefore, this passive charging is unflexible in nature. The opposite is true for smart charging. This entails both flexible charging time and power demand. Such flexibility is illustrated in this figure with the green area, within this green area, numerous different charging patterns can be formulated. But whenever we are trying to exploit this kind of flexibility, we must ensure that we satisfy the primary purpose of the EVs, which is the mobility service. To understand the value of EV charging flexibility, we can consider the perspective of different stakeholders. First, we have the system operators, the EV owners, and the aggregators. Each aggregator has a specific objective, that is to maintain secure grid operation, to reduce the charging expenses, and to maximize the revenues, respectively. The aggregator is here a relatively new entity who can manage EV charging and earn a profit of this management. I will now summarize the challenges of EV charging from the perspective of each stakeholder and discuss the potential and opportunities of smart charging. For the EV owner, they are challenged by the coincidence between the EV plug-in time and the peak time of use tariffs. This is in Denmark is between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. in the evening. With smart charging, the cost can be reduced by shifting the charging away from the peak hours. Here, the real-time pricing is normally less significant compared to the tariffs, but lately there has been a high energy price in Europe, which might be a sign of the energy market in the future. A reduction of charging cost improves the competitiveness of the EVs compared to the internal combustion engine vehicles. The tariff mechanisms are considered in task 2.2 of this project. And besides the economic sustainability that is achieved through smart charging, there is also an opportunity to improve the environmental sustainability as carbon content of the electricity production varies. In this plot, I've shown the data from the Eastern Danish system in 2020, where we can see the average CO2 content is around 100 grams per kilowatt hour, but in some occasion it increases beyond 400 grams per kilowatt hour. So if we manage the smart charging smartly, we can both improve the economic and the environmental sustainability. The aggregator offers manage the EV charging of a group of customers. If this service is not performed properly, there is a risk of negative grid impact, which can impair the primary purpose of the EVs, that is, the mobility service. Smart charging infrastructure, aggregators have better possibilities of coordinating the charging of an EV fleet, either through incentives or direct control. These coordination methods are analyzed in task 1.1, where we look at the coordination, and in task 5.1, where we are analyzing the pricing mechanisms. The aggregator can exploit the power of aggregation, which increases the flexible capacity. So we have one entity who has a large amount of flexible capacity. This enables them to act on the different energy markets, including the provision of flexibility services. For the system operator, the challenge of EVs is that these can stress the last mile of the electricity supply, as Pablo mentioned. With smart charging, infrastructure loading can be managed and investments can be deferred. Furthermore, the utilization of the power grid infrastructure can be increased. The grid impact of smart charging is evaluated in this work in work package 3. For the system operator, the smart charging represents an opportunity of balancing the supply and demand in power systems dominated by renewables. For systems with less synchronous generation, frequency support must originate from elsewhere. And as shown in the figure borrowed from the Danish TSO in Energinet, EVs can potentially provide the primary frequency response. With improved balancing measures, the system can facilitate a higher renewable penetration as considered in task 2.2. This is all from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Thies Rasmussen. For the next session, we have the overall smart charging study. To speak on this, we have introduction by Dr. Indradeep Mitra, team leader, E-mobility, Indo-German Energy Program, and also the country director for NBCTR India component. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sana. Good afternoon from Delhi. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, in this session, me and my colleague, Dr. Norbert Henze, will speak about the study. You are listening about what is smart charging and what could be the theoretical opportunities and challenges with smart charging. Now I would like to focus on actually the study that we are conducting at the moment. So the context is in our current project called NDC Transport Initiative for Asia, NDCTIA, we are focusing on the charging infrastructure of the overall ecosystem, so that the grid coupling and also the coupling between transport and energy supply would be enhanced. So in that context, we started looking about Indian situation, what could be done, and a series of items in that. In that, we have found out that the uncontrolled and uncoordinated electric vehicle charging can bring serious consequences. And also we have found out that the smart charging or managed charging is mentioned and practiced and piloted many places in the world as one key enabler for EV integration. On the other hand, we have noticed that so far there is a lack of categorical guidelines on smart charging. So in that context, we started building up the idea of going deeper into this topic. So at the moment we started with this project, where the main question is smart coordinating charging strategies. What are those strategies that will need to be adopted in different scenarios and conditions for India, specific to India, not generic, but very specific to Indian conditions? And we thought to go for a modeling in a simulation environment with the help of real data sets and not a theoretical or imaginary data, but using the actual information and data. And this approach is from the perspective of the Indian distribution power network operation, so that the interaction and integration with the distribution grid happens smoothly. That is the focus of this study. And in this current study, we are focusing mostly on the public charging stations, but to some extent also for the residential charging stations. On the other hand, if we pinpoint the key targets to achieve in this study, first, let me say that we had started this study. We are in the middle of it, and it's far from over. So it will, we are targeting for next summer to come up with interesting and very specific results out of this study. The report, which is published, released today, is forming the basis of it on the theoretical outlook of it. So here we are doing a comprehensive global review of different smart charging strategies and coordination approaches. We are performing very detailed simulations on smart charging strategies. And we are targeted to come up with a comprehensive and specific guidelines for smart charging for India. And that we are very proud and honored to have with us the team of scientists from the Fraunhofer Institute for Energy Economics and Energy System Technology, IEE, in Kassel, Germany, and supported by IIT Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, IIT Comilus in Madrid, and Technical University of Denmark in Copenhagen. And the real life examples and real life details of the grid and the behavior we are using with the help of Tata Power Company for the 3 cities, Delhi, Mumbai, and Bhubaneswar. Just trying to highlight our team, Indo-German Energy Program, IGEN Electric Mobility Team we have in GIZ India. At the moment, we are supporting in this project. Thank you. Now my next speaker will speak about it, Dr. Norbert Henze from Fraunhofer. Thank you, Sana.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I need to share my presentation. Just a minute. Okay, now you should see my slides, yes?
Yes, Dr. Norbert, we can see them.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to report about our project, to give some details on the project. And at first, I want to introduce our partners. Then I will give a general motivation for smart charging of electric vehicles very shortly, because we heard already a lot of that issue. And this will finally bring us to the aims of the present study. And finally, I will present some research questions and the approach for our investigations. Our partners in the project are Comillas with the Institute for Research and Technology, and Pablo Frias reported already on the impact of electric vehicles and charging on the power system in the last session. Then we have DTU, the Technical University of Denmark, Department of Electrical Engineering, and Thijs Rasmussen talked about challenges, benefits of flexibility in smart charging. Furthermore, we have IIT Bombay, the Department of Energy Science and Engineering, and Professor Zaki Rata will present some project takeaways together with my colleague Andre Hartung from our Fraunhofer Institute for Energy Economics and Energy System Technology in the next session. Yes, what is the motivation for smart charging? The motivation for intelligent charging methods can be derived from the fact that the transportation sector is responsible for 24% of direct carbon dioxide from fuel combustion. Yeah. And this means that electromobility in general offers a great leverage for reducing emissions in the transport sector. However, sustainable electrification brings a number of challenges. The integration of fluctuating renewable energies from wind or PV should be a key pillar in future energy scenario. And according to various use cases, requirements and load profiles for the charging of electric vehicles need to be respected. The charging will take place at various locations, at home, at work, on public streets or central charging hubs. So corresponding charging points must be provided, and only central filling stations, as for fuel-based vehicles as we have now, are not sufficient anymore. But even in case of distributed charging points in the grid, a reinforcement or expansion of the grid should be avoided as much as possible. That means the existing grid infrastructure should be utilized as much as possible, of course, without reducing the power quality and security of supply. And another challenge is that various stakeholders are involved, like grid operators, the EV owner, charging point operators, and so on. And each stakeholder has its own requirements. Yes, to cope with all these challenges, a coordination of the charging energy flow is indispensable, and especially if we look at scenarios with 100% electric vehicles. And the solution is that smart charging techniques are required to implement the coordination of charging processes. Now I will come back to our study. In this study, we will investigate the effects of e-mobility smart charging strategies on the electrical power system. By means of these investigations, we try to get answers to the key question: what are the relevant smart coordinated charging strategies that will need to be adopted in different scenarios and conditions in India? And how do we want to find the answers? What is our approach? We focus mainly on three aspects. by means of computer simulations, various smart charging strategies will be investigated, considering the datasets of real distribution feeders in India. I will come back to that point later. And a review of commercial available products and ICT infrastructure gives an overview about the state of the art. And finally, based on these results, recommendations for guidelines, policies, and regulatory for the regulations to foster the further expansion of electromobility will be elaborated. Now I'd like to come to the work package structure of the project and the workflow. We start with a literature review on various smart charging strategies and commercially available charging stations in work package 1. In parallel to that, we have chosen real distribution grid feeders in work package 2, and we have determined the required parameters in order to build a simulation model of the grid. That means lines, transformers, as well as profiles of connected loads and generation units. Then in work package number 3, we perform load flow simulations based on the grid data from work package 2 and the selected charging strategies from work package 1. This is the main research area of our project. And then based on the simulations results from work package number 3, we will propose recommendations or guidelines for implementing smart charging in India in work package number 4. Yes, and in these guidelines, the consumer response on exemplary smart charging procedures will be considered, and the consumer response is evaluated in work package number 5. Yeah, and these guidelines for smart charging, this is the main or the general project aim of our research. Now I'd like to give a short introduction to each work package. Work package number 1 is a literature review on smart charging strategies and infrastructure components. Several smart charging strategies have been discussed, like local control, centralized control, decentralized or distributed control. And furthermore, the charging infrastructure has been reviewed. This includes AC charging, DC or fast charging techniques. We reviewed basic hardware topologies for the charging components as well as the communication. With the decision process, many charging strategies were assessed and discussed in work package number 1. And as a result, the following smart charging strategies has been selected. This is a random in-window variable charging rate, coordinated EV charging and distributed generation control, time of use tariff, centralized EV coordination, and dynamic price-based coordination methods. These strategies will be investigated in the in the further simulations within this project. And to exemplify a little bit, to illustrate the first approach, random in-window variable charging rate and variable charging rate. On the right side, the upper picture it depicts the charging process without any strategy. As soon as the vehicle is plugged to the charger or the wall box, the charging process starts. And the lower picture illustrates a random in-window strategy with variable charging rate. In contrast to the figure above, the charging process is started randomly within a predefined frame. And with this frame, both the duration as well as the charging power is flexible. Work package number 2 takes care of the collection and preparation of data that are required for grid simulations. In that work package, real existing feeders will be modeled and prepared for the simulations. And therefore, the grid infrastructure components like lines or transformers, as well as load and generation profiles of prosumers must be considered. The charging process of the connected vehicles will be controlled by several strategies. In work package number 3, the simulations of the different selected strategies will be performed. And the goals of these simulations are the performance of time series simulations to analyze the behavior and effect of control strategies, analyzing their effect on various grid situations and configurations, evaluating the control strategies and finding the most fitting ones for certain grid situations in India. And finally, these results will be used to derive recommendations for regulations and practical implementations of smart charging. The simulation framework consists of the following components: the initialization and parameter setting. Then we have a grid scenario generator, a pool of EV charging and coordination strategy models. Then we perform actually the time have a time series framework to perform the simulations. And finally, of course, we have an evaluation component in order to visualize the results and to compare and evaluate the results of the simulations. The tool that we use for our simulations is PandaPower. PandaPower is an open source tool for power system modeling. It has various analysis functions, and an extensive validated model library is available, as well as the option to implement, customize modules and functions. The software has been developed jointly in Kassel by the University in Kassel and Fraunhofer IEE. And yeah, it's an open source it is available as open source software. This is an exemplary result of the simulations. In this figure is shown a bus voltage or line voltage, and without any control of the charging process, we have some strong effects here, some strong voltage dips or voltage decrease, which is not beneficial for the grid operation. But if the charging process is performed with reduced power and in return for a longer period, then the voltage reduction can be limited. And this is just an exemplary results of the simulations that we will perform. Yeah, in work package number 4, we will prepare the guidelines for this smart charging in India. Therefore, we analyze existing policies and existing regulations in India, and we take and besides that, we take existing commercially available chargers as the basis. And by means of the simulations results from work package number 3, we will assess the existing strategies and we will recommend guidelines which are matched to the actual grid situations in India. Then work package number 5 is a literature review on charging infrastructure and consumer response. The focus is in this work package is on the consumer's response to price-based incentive for flexible demand or flexible charging in our case. And many actors are involved in this process. And the question is, how do price-based charging strategies influence the user behavior? Yeah, this was a short overview about the work packages, about the concept of our project. Up to now, the work packages with the review of charging strategies, the charging infrastructure, and existing guidelines has been performed, work package 1 and work package 4 mainly. And this event is focused on this part of the project, but the work on the is going on. The other remaining items will be worked on in the next year, and the work will be continued with the simulations and the assessment of the charging strategies in the next year. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Norbert, for that beautiful overview of the project. Now that the report is released, we have the next set of speakers speaking on the key takeaways from the report. First, I would like to invite Professor Zakir Hussain Zarater from Department of Energy Science and Engineering, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, to please present his key takeaways from the report. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sahana, for the kind introduction. So I'll just share my slides, and please help me if you could see the slide deck in presentation mode.
Yes, sir. Now we can see it in presentation mode.
Thanks. Good evening and good afternoon, depending on where you are. So we have already spoken about the project, overall activities and goals of the project. And of course, at the start of the event, we heard about the context of the overall electric vehicle scenario and need for smart charging. So in this particular presentation, I will take you through some of the takeaways of the whole report. Of course, it is difficult to capture the overall takeaways of the report in short duration of time, but a gist of what we have done so far under this project and what we have concluded in this project so far is going to be touched upon in this particular presentation. So these are the broader topics covered in the report. Those who would have already got the access of the report would have come across the table of contents. And broadly speaking, we are covering this smart charging of electric vehicles, where we are talking of the basics of this, key stakeholders involved in smart charging, which is base list of stakeholders is going to be electric vehicle stakeholders anyways, but smart charging adds a layer of additional stakeholders to it. So we are covering the entire spectrum of these stakeholders that would be involved in the smart charging. Benefits, some are obvious benefits, which we all know, and some additional benefits that we have kind of captured under this report are also covered in this particular study report that is launched today. Smart charging levels and other related aspects. Smart charging technology, because this is the building block of the overall smart charging, that smart charging technologies is important element of this smart charging spectrum. So therefore, that is also we have covered in this particular report, which talks about the charging technology, connectors involved, power electronic interfaces that are required for executing the smart charging, commercially available smart charging products, both globally and in Indian EV ecosystem or Indian market that are available currently, are also analyzed and captured in this particular report. Smart chargers in India and smart EV charging projects is one of the focus areas of this report, where we have captured different demonstration and pilot smart projects that have been carried out across the world in different countries, and we have tried to analyze them and summarize the takeaways and the learnings from those smart charging projects that have been conducted so far in different countries, and also the experience of these countries in terms of the smart charging. Smart charging strategies for electric vehicles is one of the key components of this report, where we are capturing the whole landscape of the smart charging strategies that are available at the moment as the area is emerging. So therefore, there are much more strategies that we foresee down the line. But those that are available as of now have been analyzed, captured, and in a simplified possible manner projected in this particular report. Some of the aspects, of course, on the gap analysis in Indian EV ecosystems. One of the key goal of this study is to actually look at the smart charging feasibility and options and possible interventions for Indian EV ecosystem. So we have tried to analyze the EV policies in Indian EV policies and schemes in Indian context, and try to see what are the gaps or what are the areas that need more attention if we are supposed to achieve the smart charging down the line in Indian EV ecosystem. If we look a little more details, we have been hearing, because if we don't have a smart charging, there can be issues. If we have simply uncontrolled dumb charging, there can be issues. So some of the technical issues are captured here. For example, if you are having uncontrolled and uncoordinated charging, you are in all likelihood to go have higher peak loads and peak demand in the system. And then if you have a higher peak demand, that indirectly is, implies that you should have higher generation available to meet that higher peak demand. That also leads to some of the aspects of the balance between generation and load stability related aspects that could potentially arise because of the electric vehicles. And more importantly, that we need to keep in mind is these issues we are talking at higher penetration of EVs. Of course, at lower penetration, the issues are going to be either not that significant, or they are not going to be there in the system. But we are talking when we have more and more adoption of EVs, then how to handle and what could be the potential issues that these electric vehicles can incorporate in the electrical grid side. So temporal variability of charging demand would be there. That would be need to be tackled. Congestion, overloading of the transmission distribution infrastructure, distribution particularly, and at times transmission level as well. Increased emission from electric generation sources. One of the key reason for switching from the conventional ICE vehicles to electric vehicles is to reduce the carbon emission. But if we are not planning it adequately, it might actually result into additional emission, because the additional demand that we would actually cater to these electric vehicles that might be supplied from the fossil fuel based plant. So that also needs to be factored. If you are supposed to meet higher peak demand, means higher generation, that could also be potentially an issue. Power quality, because of the nonlinear power electronic interface that is there between going to be electric vehicle and the grid through these electric vehicle charging infrastructure, is also going to be an issue in the system. Phase imbalance among the three phases that we have in the AC system, potentially increased losses. So these are the only few of the, of course there are some other challenges also, but these are some of the key challenges that could be there with that are going to be likely there with electric vehicle charging integration if they are not handled and planned adequately. So what is the solution then to address these issues? Of course, one of the obvious and theoretically speaking easy solution is to upgrade the grid infrastructure. But we all know that that's going to be a costly affair, and as it is going to have cost implications, and particularly in Indian context, it is much more a challenging issue that grid infrastructure upgradation is going to be very challenging. So therefore, the alternative solution to address most of these issues is smart charging. So if we adopt a smart charging strategy to tackle these electric vehicles, in such a way that we are with least discomfort to the EV user or any stakeholder that is involved in this EV ecosystem. We can potentially avoid the grid infrastructure upgradation, and in most cases, at least defer the upgradation, reduced upgradation that would be otherwise required. In addition to addressing these issues, we can have other additional objectives that we can achieve through smart charging. Cost minimization of the charging, utilization of renewable energy can be maximized, which is very important factor. But that it is very important that this electric vehicle load is fed from the renewable energy. One is that. Second is this electric vehicles provide an opportunity because of this underlying storage. With the electric vehicles also provide an opportunity to support the grid with various potential services which are already to some extent in place in some of the countries. So therefore, we can utilize this new electric load that's going to be through this electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We can actually utilize it to support the grid to handle more renewables down the line, not only to address the challenges that I mentioned here, but also to help the grid to manage it in a secure and stable manner. Yes, so smart charging strategies, as I mentioned, there are a lot of different strategies and methodologies that one could utilize to achieve this smart charging. So broadly speaking, we can categorize them on different aspects, different classes, depending on the attribute we can consider. For example, based on topology, we can have centralized, decentralized, distributed, hierarchical, and local control strategy, smart charging control strategy. Similarly, based on location, ownership, methodology, price-based, strategies, we can have different time of use, real time, or dynamic pricing, critical peak pricing, peak rebate. Similarly, on the methodology side, we can further categorize them based on deterministic, heuristic, game theory, data science, ML, and AI-based approaches. So the report anyway captures this whole spectrum of the classification of EV smart charging that that one can understand the overall landscape of the smart charging strategy. A little bit about some of the smart charging strategies that we can talk about here. One is centralized smart charging strategy, where the aggregator and EV are involved with each other, and the information flows from the EV side, EV user side, of course, and the aggregators send us the decision and command signals to EVs depending on that, when you are supposed to charge, when you are supposed to discharge, if you have V2G availability, or when you are going to in what manner you are going to control the charging demand from the grid, if you have that control flexibility. So therefore, this is a centralized topology where the decisions are made at the central level by the aggregator. Similarly, we have another type, decentralized smart charging control strategy, where actually information flows from the aggregator side to EV user side or electric vehicle, we can say, and the decision signal flows in the reverse direction. For example, price signal can be relayed by the aggregator to the EV user or electric vehicle, and the electric vehicle user takes a decision on whether to change the control of the charging that it is currently having in place or not when it is connected to the grid for charging purpose. Similarly, we can have distributed smart charging strategy, where actually the aggregators also coordinate with each other at the aggregator level, and then we have the hierarchical strategy, control strategy, where we can have again centralized, decentralized types in this category, and accordingly the decision process and the information flow is taken care. So this shows a kind of comparative analysis of different EV charging strategies depending on these attributes that are listed in the column 1. We are comparing centralized, decentralized, distributed, and these two smart charging techniques. If we look at the computational power requirement for centralized smart charging strategy, we need much more computational power because we are doing it at the central level, and also the communication wise it is going to be on higher side. Similarly, on decentralized, because we are not going to have here the decisions are taken at the lower level, which at the aggregator level, You can see aggregator and EV user level. So we have less computational requirement. Accordingly, for distributed, we have moderately high, and for this particular strategy, we have relatively higher. And for local, if you have at an EV user level, you have to participate in this smart charging. It is of course going to be the least among these different strategies. Communication wise also, because in central control topology, you need a communication medium. You have to actually communicate to the EV users through aggregators to take a decision to control the charging of the electric vehicle. And it's going to be relatively less requirement in the decentralized case, and moderately high in distributed case, and accordingly in the other cases. Role need for smart charging algorithm. It is going to be a little higher for centralized, relatively less in decentralized, and so on and so forth. And nature of the solution that these strategies will give is going to be the global optimal solution we can actually potentially arrive at if we are using centralized topology, because we have better control on the overall EV charging fleet that we can actually control through this centralized control smart charging strategy. And others are going to give relatively suboptimal, and hierarchical is also going to give us optimal solution. Similarly, focus primary for stakeholder focus, grid operator for centralized, and of course there are going to be other stakeholders as well. So it just kind of captures the comparative analysis of different smart charging strategies that we have in place. We have electricity pricing mechanism for smart charging. I mentioned that one of the category is based on the pricing mechanism. This is real-time pricing. You can actually, this is what you call also a soft kind of smart charging, where you don't need a communication. All you need to actually is primarily price signals that if you can convey to the EV user or the participant who is participating in the smart charging. So if you see here the load, we have the base load, and then based on the load, this is the load curve, and this is the price signal. So based on the load, we have prices high. When the load is higher, the price of the electric vehicle charging is going to be higher. If the load is low, the price is going to be low. So accordingly, the prices will vary depending on the load scenario in the system. The other one is time of use. This is based on the time of use, of course, of the charging that electric vehicle will be utilizing. If it is peak load, higher load, then we are going to have higher prices. If it is off peak load or lower load, then threshold that will be there, then the prices are going to be lower for these slots of the time windows. The third one is based on price is critical peak price, where we are talking of kind of penalizing or indirectly penalizing. You can say we are raising the price of the charging if you are charging it in the critical peak load, which is going to be evening peak load primarily, and then that will discourage the EV users to charge during the peak load, and indirectly kind of decrease or reduce the impact of additional demand during the peak hours. The fourth one is this peak time rebate, where we are kind of trying to incentivize the electric vehicles who are not charging during the peak periods. So essentially, these different price mechanisms are changing the behavior or encouraging the EV user to charge their electric vehicles when the load or the power flow on the electric system, electrical grid is on lower side, and indirectly address the issues that are going to arise otherwise. So smart charging objectives. If we look at the objectives, of course, we have different main stakeholders in the system. So if you look at from the grid operator perspective, we have load flattening, valley filling, peak reduction could be the objective, reduced network overloading, maximizing utilization of renewable energy, and other possible objectives. Aggregator will have its own set of objectives. Similarly, EV user, which is the end user, and CPO will have its own objective. So it is going to be kind of somewhere some kind of conflict also in terms of the objectives of different stakeholders. But at the same time, if you look at the overall landscape, there has to be this coordinated effort to achieve and utilize this smart charging to take into consideration the interest of all the stakeholders that are involved in the smart charging. as I mentioned in the beginning, we have captured different projects. This is one of the glimpse of one of the smart charging project that's put on this slide, which is My Electric Avenue UK 2013 to 15, where the aim is to actually analyze and evaluate this eSprint this smart charging solution, which has capability to curtail the EV load. And around 100 electric vehicles, Nissan Leaf electric vehicles, were actually taken into this pilot project. And if you can see here on this plot, this is the loading of the feeder plotted on this y-axis, and we have EV penetration on the x-axis, where x-axis, 100% penetration would mean basically one electric vehicle per house holder. And if you see here, without actually using this smart charging solution, the load is actually going over 100%. That means the infrastructure of the grid is getting overloaded in that particular case. But if you look at, of course, different cases have been taken, but the primary message is if you are able to use the smart charging solution, you can actually limit the load, total load within the capacity of the existing infrastructure, and also at the same time meeting the EV charging low demand requirement for all the electric vehicles. So this kind of demonstrates that how smart charging can potentially address the issues that we are concerned about with the integration of high number of electric vehicles. So these are globally available commercial EV smart charging products we have captured in detail in the report. But broadly speaking, you can categorize them in different categories depending on their application, whether it's a network level tool, it is an optimization solution, it's based on the controller, or it is focusing on the chargers. And these are some of the examples of commercially available smart charging solutions. So what it actually tries to kind of put the message here is that there are already actually players in the smart charging solution out there, and the smart charging is in all likelihood going to help us in handling the electric vehicles in a better and effective manner. And if we come to the India, we have also some of the smart charging solutions available in the market as of now, and we are foreseeing that down the line we'll have many more smart charging solutions coming up in Indian EV market as well. Well, so as I mentioned, we try to analyze the policies and schemes of the related to electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging infrastructure in India or EV ecosystem in general. And we know that this slide captures the journey of this EV adoption in India from starting from 2010 to this 2021 FAME 2 extension that's up to 2024 now that we are currently in. So therefore, there has been a lot of effort done at the central and state government level to actually push this electric vehicle transportation in the country. So from our analysis, what we saw is these are the attributes that have been actually focused in the electric vehicle policies currently that are already floated, or be it in draft or the final stage. And these are the areas that we see need a more focus in this electric vehicle policies and schemes. Public awareness, incentives for residential and workplace charging, EV specific tariff structure need is much more focus, particularly land allocation and concessional information on incentive reimbursement and grid upgradation analysis can actually provide us more insights into this what could be, how we could handle these more electric vehicles in a better and effective manner. From smart charging perspective, of course, these are some are general, but we have tried to kind of customize it to the Indian EV ecosystem. But broadly speaking, they are applicable to any EV ecosystem. Of course, these advantages are already mentioned, and we feel that these could be additional focus areas that could be there in Indian smart charging infrastructure. Down the line, development in charging infrastructure, of course, is going to be the primary objective that should be actually in focus. Roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders. As I mentioned, in smart charging, we will have additional number of stakeholders. So therefore, it is important to focus on this aspect as well. Designing and strengthening of regulations and policies which are focused on the smart charging. In next slide, I capture some of those aspects as well. enabling ICT, which is going to be very important for the smart charging infrastructure, strengthening the role of aggregators and system operators, and relevant R&D in this system, in this sector. EV smart charging in Indian EV policy schemes regulations. What we saw is these are some of the, of course, we have state level EV policies and schemes at the central level. So this doesn't mean that all states have focused on these aspects, but we're trying to capture that these are the aspects that have been focused in some of the EV policies in India. Support for local RE generation, which is currently in focus. Presence of central management system, which is an essential requirement for handling EV load. Smart-based, cloud-based payment option is. Some mention of V2G is there, but it is as of now, primarily limited to the mention of this, which is still appreciated, and the focus on R&D. What we feel is need a little more focus is on incentives for smart charging, public awareness about the smart charging benefits and roles of smart charging, DISCOM readiness for implementing the smart charging from the distribution side, retrofitting of old charging and fueling stations, smart charging station, priority in land allocation for smart charging stations, ICT infrastructure should be the focus. Security standards, when we talk about smart charging, the security becomes important aspect in it. E-roaming and interoperability is also very important, along with that grid support. Of course, smart charging, one of the primary objective is to actually have grid support services also captured from these electric vehicles. This particular slide captures different states here. Sorry for the congestion here. You can see here this very short form, but for those who want to read, the full form is here of the different states. We have captured different states here, and these are different factors and attributes that we have considered which state has covered in their EV policy. You can see some states have covered different a range of these aspects, and some have not covered much of them. So therefore, accordingly, we are trying to kind of highlight that there is a need to focus on those aspects. So concluding this overall presentation, of course, the conclusion so far, that is the disclaimer, is the conclusion so far that we have in the study done as of now, and we are going to have much more to do in the next few months as well. So smart charging definitely in all likelihood is going to play a very critical role in seamless adoption of the electric vehicles in the transportation sector. And in addition to other obvious advantages, smart charging can address most of the critical issues on the grid integration side. India being at the relatively at the early stage of the electric vehicle adoption has an opportunity to plan the smart charging strategy, smart charging in the Indian EV ecosystem, which can be better utilized as we move forward in this journey of electric vehicle adoption. We have captured the gap analysis of the state EV policy schemes that are presented here, and analysis of existing and upcoming EV policies have been captured, and there has been, the conclusion has been that there is a need for, of course, a dedicated focus on the smart charging consideration for long-term adoption of EVs in the system, which will also, as a reiterated, that will help us managing the grid in various forms and various dimensions. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention. Over to you, Sahana. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Zakir, for that beautiful overview of the report and also the key takeaways. Now, I would request Mr. Andre Hartung, Fraunhofer IE, R&D Division, Power System Stability and Converter Technology, to kindly present his key takeaways from the report.
Yes, thank you. So, hello everyone. My task was to conduct a literature review on EV charging equipment components in the context of smart charging. And on the next few slides, I will highlight selected content, key takeaways of the report on this topic. For the report, 6 topics related to smart chargers were investigated, which are displayed here. The focus of this very short presentation are the topics charger types and power electronics on the left-hand side. The different connectors which are used for vehicle charging in individual parts of the world are displayed in the report as well. The topic communication protocols is very vital for smart charging, and different solutions are discussed today. A major difficulty, for example, is to cover the requirements and standards in communication for the different connections necessary for smart charging. In addition, the report contains a list of commercially available chargers, as well as a list of standards for different fields of application. So the first topic I'd like to talk about are the charging types. The most common way of charging is using conductive charging by wire. Conductive charging systems are classified in onboard and offboard charging systems, whereby the power electronics is located onboard the car or in the electric vehicle supply equipment. Onboard charging, on the one hand, is limited to about 22 kilowatts of charging power for practical reasons and is the prevailing charger type for normal charging. The implementation of offboard charging is possible for normal charging as well as fast charging. But today it is the prevailing technology for fast charging. Both of those concepts can provide the potential for smart charging functions, but regarding the intended application, normal charging provides more flexibility. On the bottom of this slide, you can see several other charging technologies which focus on improving the convenience of the charging process mainly, for example, inductive charging or automatic conductive charging. Battery swapping speeds up the process of refueling energy while charging a battery outside of the car or two-wheeler. Pantograph charging is a way for automated charging of buses or heavy-duty trucks via charging stations or overhead lines. All of those mentioned options tend to improve the availability of the grid connection and therefore raise the potential for smart charging flexibilities. The question is, if the type of charger itself has a minor influence on smart charging capability, what other charging hardware-related influences can be identified? The type of power electronics influences the possible functionalities. The basic configuration of unidirectional chargers provides the most important types of flexibility, namely the reduction of charging power and the possibility to shift the charging process in time, which we heard a lot of about in the previous talks. For providing more advanced functions in the context of smart charging, for example, for providing reactive power, more active switches are necessary to use the power factor correction. To provide every smart function, including active power feedback or so-called vehicle-to-grid functionality, a bidirectional topology is required with even more active switches, which results in even higher cost of the infrastructure. On this slide, several key takeaways are listed. The charger type influences the smart charging capability by its intended application, as already mentioned. The charging connectors for Mod 3 and 4 charging are different all over the world, but are prepared for smart charging. For advanced smart charging capabilities like active power feedback, additional effort for power electronics is necessary. And last but not least, communication protocols and corresponding hardware are vital for smart charging, and standardization is still in progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Andre Hartung. Now to present the way forward for this project, I would like to request Professor Martin Braun, Fraunhofer Institute for Energy Economics, to kindly present his talk.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to somehow conclude the very interesting presentations of the colleagues on the topic of smart charging strategies and technologies with a way forward. So I'd like to finally give an idea about the goals and benefits of the studies, the stakeholders we address, and an outlook on future trends in electromobility that are visionary in one sense, but as we heard from the very beginning, with a fast pace, I think we will get inside quite fast. The goals of the project are summarized here with a review on different smart charging strategies, as you have already heard of, simulations with real grid data by Tata Power, which we really appreciate, and the long year support and cooperation is here really helpful. We evaluate those smart charging strategies with the real situation in the grid infrastructure, the end consumer situation, and provide recommendations for policies and regulations in order to facilitate those smart charging strategies that are best fitting into the requirements. And from those recommendations, we also like to provide concrete guidelines how to bring smart EV charging forward in India. So in total, we want to improve the overall environment seen from technical, policy, regulatory perspectives related to the EV charging infrastructure, smart charging strategies, and consumer response. We have a broad spectrum of stakeholders that we address with the recommendations as a final results from this project activity. We have the state governments in India, the planning regulatory agencies, the DISCOMs, transmission system operators as well, and many other stakeholders from EV manufacturers, charging infrastructure industry, and so on. However, presently we have limitations in the study we are performing. So the scope is mainly considering the smart charging interactions between the power system, the requirements of the power system, the advantages and disadvantages of different charging strategies, and the needs of the vehicle users. We look at public charging stations and to some extent also at home charging stations. And an important limitation is that we only look at unidirectional power flow, which is as a starting point for the first steps into smart charging strategy, absolutely fine. However, I also like to look beyond what we are planning to do within the study, and I'd like to give some ideas about future trends that we see at the horizon that are maybe not so far away even. So instead of unidirectional charging, we also have the bidirectional approach, so that we not only can charge the batteries, but that we can also discharge energy from the battery and provide this power to different objectives. So we can supply loads by an electrical vehicle battery. So we can have our power supply, our moving power supply available. We can use EV battery better as a storage device in home energy management system using PV module power generation, for example, better to provide the local power requirements. And the third, which is, I think, very important from a full system perspective, we look into the grid support. That means ancillary services are possible to provide, to facilitate power system operation by using positive active power injection into the grid for frequency stability, for voltage stability, and even other services for power system operation like network restoration in case of blackout situations. So building island grids to certain degrees with electrical vehicles becomes future. Another vision which is not really a technical vision, but is existing, is wireless charging. So I remember my own activity 10 years ago when we started our first project on wireless charging of electrical vehicles. It's working. However, standards, guidelines, and so on are quite challenging, at least in the German context. And I love the idea of not having cables and plugging in, plugging out, and so on. So this is really smart wireless charging, where you just drive to a parking lot and everything else goes automatically, remotely, wirelessly. And maybe one picture with regard to overhead lines, so powering trucks at highways with overhead lines, is also an option to reduce the battery capacity that needs to be carried on the trucks. And finally, I think this is one of the visionary aspects of high degree. This is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, on the one hand, with regard to autonomous driving. So considering even first cars driving on different roads around the globe, the autonomous driving will be the future trend, and so it will also have an impact on the smart charging approach, because of course the cars can drive to a fitting parking lot actually, and combining this maybe also with wireless charging or automized plugging in, plugging out, there also the charging aspects can be within the grid, within the location, can be modified. And of course, which is already existing in some charging strategies which use artificial intelligence to create best charging schedules according to battery characteristics, EV using periods, so considering the specific user behavior and favorite behavior trends, the local energy demand and the smart home, the electricity tariffs as they change according to market situations and congestion situations, and actually also building digital twins here about how the full infrastructure behaves under all changing and flexible requirements. So that's as a little visionary closing from our side towards on the future trends of electromobility, and I think we can provide with our project activity, with all partners actively contributing in here, we can provide first important steps going into the future decarbonized and smart mobility.
Thank you, Professor Martin, for introducing our audience to the future trends in electromobility. And on the same lines, I am proud to announce that GIZ has also embarked upon a project on bidirectional charging. It is our new V2X project that we have started from this month, and hopefully soon we will have reports from that as well. Moving on, I would also like to apologize to our audience for the slight delay. We are overshooting time by 5 minutes or so, but I hope the audience will understand that we have global speakers with us, and therefore this would not be much of an inconvenience. I would now like to request Dr. Ganesh Das, Head Strategy, Business Excellence and Collaborations, Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much for the great discussions, and thank you all the participation from the participant for staying for the couple of hours to hear this. It's an important area. The importance is demonstrated by the fact that two of the greatest economic driver for any country, transportation and energy, are coming together, and they are going to set the road for addressing the important challenge of climate change. I think not only from the India perspective, but from the global perspective, whatever is the learning which comes out, because the whole game is how do we really optimize. It's not very a great science to understand that charging is required. You can provide the facility, but how do we do it in a most cost-effective, most optimal manner? And here we're talking about a geography which is got something like 1,200 units consumption per annum vis-a-vis the world average of 3,200 units. You are talking about India, and you're looking at a strategy for all the developed countries who are struggling to really use energy for their basic means, and we are talking about extending it to transportation. So it is all the more important for us to be very optimal for doing that. Thank you GIZ for the great initiative from the side, and as always, Dr. Wilfred Dram, a pleasure to see you spearheading this with Indradeep and Shweta from the GIZ side. And then we have the team from the Fraunhofer Institute, Henrik Maske, Andreas Kohn. He's not there. Cannot see. Yeah, today Norbert Henze, Andre Biswick, and of course Zakir from the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. And then we have the Denmark Technical University. Always great to come in, and then for doing that, and IIT Komilas, great team to really address this important challenge. And what we want to assure you is, though Tata Power is providing all the data from Delhi, Mumbai and Bhubaneswar, we have picked up all the 3 different cities so that we could come out with a report which could be kind of spread across and scaled up across India. So we have a team of almost 15 to 20 individuals and employees who are working on this project from all the 3 discoms, and they're supported by the CEOs of all the 3 discoms. We heard Dr. Praveer Sinha, CEO and MD of Tata Power. We have Ganesh Srinivasan from Tata Power Delhi Distribution, who have been supporting this study, Nilesh Kane, Chief of Mumbai Distribution, and Shenbegam Mantiram from the CEO of the Odisha, the Central Odisha Discom, for supporting that. So it's a great study, and we thank you once again, GIZ and the participants for this, and then of course Niti Aayog for supporting this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Das, for your kind words. I would like to invite now Ms. Shweta Kalia, Junior Technical Expert, GIZ India, to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of GIZ India.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I, on behalf of GIZ India, extend a very hearty thanks to all the speakers and participants for gracing your knowledge today on a highly important topic in the electric mobility domain, smart charging. Mostly, our sincere thanks to Dr. Stefan Koch, Minister, Head of the Department for Economic and Global Affairs, Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, for enlightening us with the direct role of electric mobility and climate protection goals and environmental sustainability. He discussed about Germany's broader agenda to focus on decarbonizing transport that essentially includes adoption of e-mobility and fast charging infrastructure. We would like to express our immense gratitude to Mr. Sudhendu Jyoti Sinha, Advisor Infrastructure, Connectivity and Electric Mobility Vertical Niti Aayog, for saying kind words about the report and also giving great insights on how the entire world is committed to transform the transport sector through electric mobility, wherein he highlighted that charging infrastructure and batteries are key drivers for it. And this report highlights the importance of managed charging, which we call as also a smart charging, for a smooth integration of EVs into the existing grid. Our sincere thanks to Dr. Praveer Sinha, CEO and Managing Director, Tata Power, for giving useful insights on the existing charging infrastructure set up by Tata Power and how they plan to optimize and scale it up going ahead. Like he gave a perspective from a networks operator side on how it becomes really important to ensure a stable power supply. And for that, smart charging has a great role to play through real-time advanced and dynamic solutions. Many thanks to our study execution partners, Professor Pablo Fries from IIT Komilas, Professor Zakir Rathur from IIT Bombay, Professor Martin Braun from Fraunhofer IEE, Mr. Thijs Rasmussen from Technical University of Denmark, Mr. Andre Hartung from Fraunhofer IEE, and a very special thanks to Dr. Norbert Henze and his team for supporting us in organizing this event. Our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Ganesh Das and his team from Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited for co-organizing this event and supporting us throughout for the overall study on the smart charging. Many thanks to the communications team from Tata Power, GIZ India and NDC-TIA project for giving our PR and communication support. Last but not the least, we would like to thank every participant who marked their presence and enriched the event with interesting insights and questions. We will address your questions received in the chat box through an email within a day or two. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you everyone again for joining the sessions. Have a very good evening and good afternoon.
Thank you, Shweta. With this, we come to an end of this event. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of GIZ and the entire NDCTR family, I take this opportunity to thank each one of you for taking your time out and attending this e-launch event. You may access the full report from the digital library on green mobility. And as Shweta has already informed, the complete video recording and the answers to the queries posted in the chat box will be uploaded in the DLGM portal, and it will also be published on all our GIZ India's social media pages. So kindly follow us. And I would also like to thank you all once again and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.